Last summer, I woke up to find my ranch's water supply completely drained overnight. At first, I thought it was a busted pipe until I caught Karen, the HOA queen herself, siphoning water straight into her fancy mansion's pool. That was the last straw. I've spent years playing by their petty rules, but when they mess with my land and my family's water, they cross a line. What would you do if someone thought they owned what's rightfully yours? Would you fight back, or let them walk all over you? Let us know where you're watching from today. And if you're new here, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to join our growing community. I live on a stretch of land that's been in my family for 3 generations, a modest ranch with rolling hills, a small pond, and a water well that's kept us going through every dry season. This past summer, though, was different. The drought hit us hard. By mid-June, the grass had turned brittle under the blazing sun, and the pond's water line had dropped nearly 2 feet. Every morning, I'd check the well and the irrigation system, making sure we conserved every drop. One early morning, I noticed something odd. The pump meter showed a huge water draw overnight, more than I had used in an entire week. My first thought was a leak, maybe a busted pipe underground. I grabbed my tools and spent hours checking every line from the well to the irrigation valves. Nothing. No leaks. No wet ground. Nothing that could explain why hundreds of gallons had disappeared while I slept. As the day went on, my gut told me something wasn't right. Around noon, I saw Karen, the self-proclaimed president of the HOA, driving by in her spotless white SUV. She gave me that smug little wave she always does, the kind that feels more like a taunt than a greeting. Karen's the kind of woman who thinks every patch of land should look like a luxury golf course. She's been on my back for years about my unmanicured pastures, my old pickup parked by the barn, and even the way I hang my American flag. That evening, while I sat on the porch sipping my coffee, I couldn't shake the feeling that Karen had something to do with the missing water. She'd recently had a giant pool installed behind her mansion, a pool so big it looked like it belonged at a resort, not in our small neighborhood. I remembered overhearing her bragging at a block meeting about how water restrictions don't apply when you know the right people. I decided to keep an eye on things that night. I set up an old trail camera near the pump house, hidden in the shadows, just in case. Then I went inside, grabbed a notepad, and started jotting down all the times I'd seen Karen or her contractors messing around near the shared property line. The more I wrote, the more my anger boiled. Around 2 a.m., I woke to the faint hum of machinery outside. My ranch was dead quiet except for that sound. I slipped on my boots, grabbed my flashlight, and crept out back. From the edge of my property, I could see the glow of lights near the pump station. I squinted, heart pounding, and caught a glimpse of a hose, my hose, running from the main water line toward the fence that bordered Karen's yard. The nerve of that woman. She was stealing my water. Plain and simple. I clenched my fists so hard I felt my nails dig into my palms. That water wasn't just mine, it was my family's lifeline, the resource that kept my horses, cattle, and crops alive. If she drained it dry, I'd have nothing left to keep the ranch running. The next morning, I walked down to check the well again, and sure enough, the water levels were lower than ever. I ran my hand along the metal casing, feeling the heat from the sun, and made myself a promise if Karen thought she could steal from me and get away with it. She had another thing coming. I didn't confront her that day. Instead, I spent my time gathering every piece of evidence I could think of: meter readings, video clips from my trail camera, even photos of the faint tracks her SUV left near the pump house. I wanted to be ready, not just to accuse, but to expose her for what she was: a thief with no respect for anyone's land but her own. But before I could make my move, things escalated. That night, I found her out there again this time, not bothering to hide. She was siphoning water like it was her God-given right. And that was when I decided I was going to fight back, no matter what it took. The following night, I wasn't going to sit idle while Karen drained me dry. I'd already checked my trail camera and confirmed what I suspected. The footage showed her sneaking around my pump house with a long industrial hose, hooking it up like she owned the place. That was all the confirmation I needed. But I wanted more than proof. I wanted to catch her red-handed. Around midnight, I parked my truck a good distance away from the ranch, out of sight from the road, and waited in the dark with the engine off. The air was dry and thick with the smell of dust. Crickets chirped, and the moon hung low, casting pale light over the fields. At 1:30 a.m., I saw the faint beam of headlights in the distance. Sure enough, Karen's white SUV rolled slowly down the gravel road, moving like a prowler in the night. She pulled up near the side fence where my water line ran underground. I crouched low behind a stack of hay bales, my heart pounding like I was on some kind of covert mission. Karen got out of the SUV wearing silk pajamas, of all things, and oversized sunglasses at night. She had one of those entitled looks plastered on her face, like she was doing nothing wrong. She popped the trunk and hauled out a large gas-powered pump, the kind you'd use on a construction site. I could hardly believe it. She wasn't just siphoning a little water, she was stealing hundreds of gallons every time she came out here. I gritted my teeth as she dragged the pump toward my fence line, hooked up my hose, and fired it up. The sound of that pump echoed in the night like an insult. I stepped out from behind the hay bales, flashlight in hand. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" "Karen." My voice cut through the darkness like a whip. Karen froze for half a second, then turned to me with that fake sweet smile she always used when she wanted to manipulate someone. "Oh, hi there. I was just testing the water pressure. You know, for the HOA. We have standards to maintain." I walked closer, shining the light right in her face. "Standards you're stealing my water to fill your damn pool, aren't you?" She crossed her arms like a petulant child. "This whole neighborhood has to look presentable. And my property is an extension of this community. If your ranch doesn't contribute, we all suffer. I'm just making sure things stay in order." Her audacity nearly knocked me over. I took another step forward, feeling my anger burn hotter. "Lady, this water comes from my well, from my land. You don't get to decide who it belongs to. You want to fill your pool, pay for it like everyone else." Karen scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. "Oh, please. The HOA has more authority than you think. We could have fined you for that ugly fence or your rusty truck months ago, but we've been nice. If I want a little water for my property, it's nothing compared to what we let slide for you." Her words hit me like poison. This wasn't just about water, it was about control. Karen and her HOA lapdogs thought they owned everyone around them. I took a slow breath and leaned in close enough for her to see I meant business. "You touch my water again, and I promise you, Karen, you'll regret it." Karen smirked like she didn't believe me, then rolled up her hose and sauntered back to her SUV. "Fine, be that way, but don't think you can stop me. The HOA has rules, and I'm the one who writes them." With that, she drove off, leaving a trail of dust behind her. I stood there in the quiet night, fists clenched, heart hammering. I knew this was far from over. Karen wasn't the kind of person to back down just because someone told her no. If anything, I had just lit a fire under her. I went back inside my ranch house and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the trail camera footage again. Every clip showed her smug face, dragging that pump like she owned the place. It was all the evidence I needed to take her down. But as I stared at that footage, a different thought began to form. Maybe it wasn't enough just to stop her. Maybe it was time to send a message that neither she nor her HOA would ever forget. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed up sketching out ideas on a notepad, thinking about every way I could flip the script on her. And by the time the sun rose, I had a plan to turn Karen's theft into her own worst nightmare. By the next day, I was done playing quiet. Karen thought she could bully me, the way she bullied half the neighborhood. But I wasn't some timid homeowner who would bow to her fake authority. I'd had enough. That morning, I loaded my truck with the trail camera footage, water meter logs, and a printed stack of photos showing her stealing my water. I wasn't just going to confront her, I was going to make sure the entire neighborhood saw what kind of person she really was. I waited until Saturday, when I knew most of the neighbors would be out and about, either mowing lawns or sipping coffee on their porches. I wanted witnesses, and Karen loved putting on a show. I spotted her SUV parked out front of her sprawling mansion, the kind with fake Roman columns and a driveway that sparkled like it had been polished. She was out front, talking to two HOA board members, no doubt scheming about someone else's property. I drove right up and parked my dusty old pickup truck across the street. When I stepped out, people turned their heads. I guess I had that look in my eye, the look of a man who'd had enough. "Karen," I called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. "We need to talk. Now." She gave me a fake smile, tilting her head like I was some unruly child. "Oh, good morning. What can I do for you?" I pulled the trail camera photos from my folder and held them up. "You can start by explaining why you've been stealing my water in the middle of the night." Her smile faltered for a split second, but she quickly recovered. "I have no idea what you're talking about. Those must be doctored photos or some misunderstanding." I laughed a sharp, bitter laugh that carried across the street. "Misunderstanding, Karen. I have video of you hooking a pump to my well. You've drained hundreds of gallons from my supply, and you've done it more than once. Do you think this is a game?" The HOA members shifted uncomfortably. One of them, a guy named Rick, who always followed Karen's lead, muttered, "Maybe we should discuss this privately." "No," I said firmly. "There's nothing private about stealing from your neighbor. Everyone here deserves to know what kind of person is running this HOA. Karen's face flushed red, but she wasn't about to back down. She put her hands on her hips and sneered. "You know, if your property wasn't such an eyesore, maybe we wouldn't have to take matters into our own hands. Your pond isn't just for you. It's part of the aesthetic of this entire community. My pool is a community asset, and I'm maintaining the neighborhood's value by keeping it full." I stepped closer, my voice low and steady, but sharp enough to cut through her nonsense. "Your pool isn't my problem, Karen. And let me be clear, if you touch my water again, I won't just go to the HOA. I'll go to the sheriff. Theft is theft, no matter how you dress it up." Karen tried to laugh it off, but it sounded forced. "The sheriff, please. We both know you don't have the nerve. And even if you do, good luck winning. I have connections. The HOA will stand behind me. Then I guess it's time we see who the community really stands behind." I shot back. I turned to the growing group of neighbors who had come out to watch. "You all know what she's been doing. My camera caught her, plain as day. If she can steal from me, she can steal from any of you. Is that who you want calling the shots?" There were murmurs among the crowd. A few heads nodded. One older neighbor shouted, "Enough is enough." "Karen." For the first time, I saw doubt flicker in Karen's eyes. She wasn't used to being challenged publicly. She started to say something, but I cut her off. "I'm done arguing. If you want water, you pay for it. You step on my land or touch my well again, and I'll bring every piece of evidence I have to the county office. And trust me, they don't take kindly to HOA bullies stealing resources during a drought." Karen glared at me, her lips pressed into a thin line. "This isn't over," she spat. "Good," I said with a cold smile, "because neither is my fight." I turned and walked back to my truck, the photos still clutched in my hand. The crowd parted like I was some kind of sheriff walking out of a standoff. I could feel the tide shifting. Neighbors were whispering, exchanging looks, and for once, they weren't siding with her. But I knew Karen. She wasn't the type to let this slide. She'd come at me harder, and I had to be ready. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the trail camera footage one more time. If Karen wanted a war, she was going to get one, and I was going to hit her where it hurt most, her precious mansion. After the confrontation with Karen, I sat in my kitchen late into the night, my coffee cold and untouched. I knew one thing for sure. Karen wasn't going to back down. She was the kind of person who thrived on control, and I had just embarrassed her in front of the entire neighborhood. If I didn't strike back now, she would see my silence as weakness. I wasn't about to let that happen. I pulled out my old notepad and started jotting down ideas. This wasn't going to be some childish prank or meaningless revenge. I wanted justice real, undeniable justice. My ranch was my livelihood, and the water from my well wasn't just for me. It kept my cattle alive, my crops watered, and my family's heritage running strong. Karen had crossed a line, and I was going to make sure she paid for it. The first thing I did was call an old friend, Mason. He used to work as a county water inspector before retiring, and if anyone knew the ins and outs of local water laws, it was him. Mason picked up after 2 rings. "Buddy," I said, "I need your expertise. Someone's been siphoning water from my well, someone with a big mouth and an even bigger ego." When I told him it was Karen from the HOA, Mason whistled low. "You've got to be kidding me. That's not just theft. That's a criminal offense. If you can prove it, she's in deep trouble. Gather every shred of evidence you've got, and I'll help you take it to the county." His words hit me like a shot of adrenaline. I already had plenty of evidence, trail camera footage, water meter readings, and tire tracks near my pump house, but I wanted more. I installed a new digital flow monitor that tracked every gallon pumped from my well, down to the minute. If Karen tried to steal again, I'd have irrefutable proof. But proof alone didn't feel like enough. I wanted Karen to experience the fear and frustration she had caused me. That's when the idea hit me. There was a natural runoff channel on the far side of my property, just a few yards from her perfectly manicured lawn. With some careful work, I could redirect that runoff toward her backyard. I wasn't planning to destroy her mansion, just give her a taste of what it felt like to lose control of her own domain. I spent the next several days working on the plan. I dug shallow trenches in the hard-packed earth, installed a set of berms, and built a bypass line that could channel excess water straight toward her property. It was grueling work under the summer sun, and my hands were blistered by the end of each day. But I didn't care. Every shovelful of dirt brought me one step closer to teaching Karen a lesson she wouldn't forget. Meanwhile, I played it cool in public. When I saw Karen at the local grocery store, she wore that same smug smile as if nothing had happened. "Hope you're not still angry," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. The HOA would hate for this to escalate. I stared her down and said, "Oh, I'm not angry. I'm just making plans." The look on her face faltered for just a second, but she quickly recovered and walked off. That moment told me I was in her head now, and that was exactly where I wanted her. One evening, Mason came by the ranch to check on my progress. I showed him the water logs, the photos, and the new runoff system I'd been building. He chuckled and shook his head. "Just make sure this is all above board. You don't want to get tangled up in anything that could come back on you." "Don't worry," I said. "I'm not breaking the law. I'm just letting nature do what it does best, flow downhill." By Friday night, I was ready. I stood on my porch, staring across at Karen's mansion. Her pool was lit up like some kind of resort, and I could hear the faint sounds of laughter and music. She was throwing another one of her parties, no doubt showing off the water she had stolen from me. I walked down to the hidden valve I'd installed at the base of my property. My hand rested on the handle for a moment as I thought about everything she had done, the theft and the lies, the smug attitude. Then I turned it. At first, it was just a trickle, but within minutes, I could hear the rush of water flowing down the channel, heading straight toward her backyard. I stood there, silent, watching the first patches of her perfect lawn darken with moisture. By the time I saw the distant glow of flashlights and heard shouting from her yard, I knew my plan had worked. Karen had no idea what was coming next, and that was exactly the point. The sound of shouting from Karen's backyard was music to my ears. I stood there in the cool night air, leaning against the fence, watching her mansion's lights flicker as her party turned into chaos. Her perfect lawn, which she boasted about at every HOA meeting, was starting to look like a shallow swamp. Guests scrambled to move patio chairs and poolside decorations as the water crept closer. For once, Karen wasn't in control. Nature, with a little help from me, had taken over. But this wasn't just about a temporary flood. I needed to turn the entire situation around so that Karen's power and arrogance would collapse like the house of cards it was. To do that, I needed 2 things: undeniable public proof of her theft, and a dramatic, unforgettable reminder of why you don't mess with a man's land. The next morning, I made a call to Mason. I told him everything that happened the night before, from the valve release to Karen's backyard turning into a pond. He laughed so hard I thought he might choke on his coffee. "You're a dangerous man. You know that," he said between laughs. "But you're also smart. If she complains about that water, You've got the drought laws on your side. It's runoff, not sabotage. Let her try to twist that. Exactly, I said, but I'm not done yet. I want the HOA to see who they've been backing all this time. Karen needs to be exposed in front of everyone. Mason suggested something that made perfect sense, a formal HOA meeting, recorded and attended by as many neighbors as possible. If I brought my evidence and presented it calmly, the truth would speak for itself. And with Karen's backyard still wet and muddy, I'd have the perfect visual proof to drive the point home. That week, I quietly spread the word among the neighbors. I told them I had something important to share at the next HOA meeting, something they needed to see with their own eyes. Curiosity spread like wildfire. People who usually avoided these meetings started promising they'd be there, and I could feel the tide of opinion shifting. Folks were tired of Karen's constant bullying, and this was their chance to see the truth. Meanwhile, Karen tried to act like nothing had happened. She hired a landscaping crew to drain and fix her yard, and I even caught her hosing down the driveway to wash away the mud. When I passed by in my truck, she shot me a look so full of venom it almost made me laugh. I just tipped my hat and kept driving. She had no idea what was coming. On the day of the meeting, I showed up early with a stack of printed photos, a USB drive containing video clips, and copies of my water logs. I wasn't there to shout or cause a scene. I wanted to be the calm, collected man who simply presented the truth. When Karen arrived, her heels clicking on the pavement, she looked as if she had just stepped out of a luxury catalog. Her confidence was back, but I could see the cracks in her armor. Trying to stir up more trouble, she sneered as she walked by. Just telling the truth, I said evenly. You might want to take a seat in the front row. This will be worth watching. The meeting began, as usual, with Karen rambling on about HOA dues, fence colors, and lawn care. I let her go on for a while before I raised my hand. I'd like to bring up an issue that affects everyone here, I said, standing up slowly. Karen tried to cut me off. This is not the time for personal disputes, sir. Oh, it's not personal, I said, my voice carrying across the room. It's criminal. I walked to the front, plugging my USB drive into the projector the HOA used for presentations. The first clip rolled a night vision shot from my trail camera showing Karen hooking her pump to my water line. The room went dead silent. Gasps echoed around as her face appeared on screen. Caught in the act. This is your HOA president, I said firmly. Stealing water from my private well during a drought. Not once, not twice. 3 separate nights. Karen leapt from her chair. This is slander. You can't owe. But I can. I interrupted, holding up my water logs and photos. These are the readings from my well, showing massive draws every time she did this. And here, I flipped through a stack of photos. Are the tracks from her SUV right where she parked by my pump house? The room erupted with murmurs. People turned to Karen, their faces a mix of shock and anger. One neighbor, a quiet man who'd been fined repeatedly for his improper garden, stood up and shouted, "You've been stealing from us while we've been paying your fines and rules," Karen stammered, her usual confidence melting away. I was borrowing. For the community, I said, my voice sharp. You filled your pool while my livestock barely had enough to drink. You drained my well while telling the rest of us how to live. That's not community. That's greed. By the end of the meeting, Karen had no defense left. The HOA board members looked ready to sink into their chairs, embarrassed and furious. I knew then that the tables had officially turned. After that HOA meeting, Karen's grip on the neighborhood slipped like mud in the rain. Neighbors who once followed her blindly now avoided her gaze. Some even came by my ranch to shake my hand and thank me for standing up to her. But Karen wasn't finished, not by a long shot. I could see it in her eyes when she stormed out of that meeting, her face pale and tight-lipped. She was plotting something, and I knew I had to be ready. Sure enough, 2 days later, I caught her standing by the property line with her phone out, snapping photos of my barn and fence like she was building a new case against me. I didn't even bother confronting her. I just smiled and waved. That smile must have driven her crazy because that very night, she tried one last desperate move. I woke up around 3 to a loud humming noise outside, faint, but unmistakable. I grabbed my flashlight, slipped on my boots, and crept out back. What I found made my jaw tighten. Karen had hired 2 men with a portable pump truck, trying to siphon water again, but this time directly from my pond. They must have thought they could work fast and get away before dawn. I didn't yell. I didn't even say a word. Instead, I turned on my phone and started recording, making sure to capture every face and license plate. When one of the men noticed me, he froze. Karen turned around, her hair a mess and her expensive robe flapping in the breeze. She opened her mouth to speak, but I just said, "Keep going. Don't stop on my account. The sheriff will want to see this footage." Her face went pale, and the men quickly disconnected the pump, loading it back onto their truck. She muttered something about needing water for an emergency, but I wasn't buying it. "You're done." "Karen," I told her, my voice calm but sharp, "you've already buried yourself with the HOA. This time, you're burying yourself with the law." I went inside, uploaded the video to a secure folder, and called Mason. He told me to sit tight, that the county would take my evidence seriously. But as I hung up, I glanced at the valve I'd installed for my runoff channel. That's when the idea struck me I didn't have to wait for the law to teach Karen a lesson. Nature and gravity could do the job faster. The next afternoon, the sky darkened with heavy rain clouds. It was one of those rare summer storms that hit our area hard and fast. As the first drops fell, I went out to the runoff channel I'd built and checked my system. Everything was set. With the ground already saturated from my earlier plan, it wouldn't take much to send a torrent of water straight toward her mansion. By nightfall, the rain was pounding down in sheets, and I twisted the valve open all the way. The runoff water rushed downhill, carrying mud and debris along with it. Within minutes, I could hear shouting from Karen's property. I stepped onto my porch, coffee in hand, and watched from a distance as water pooled around her pristine backyard, seeping onto her patio and creeping toward the pool deck. It didn't take long before her party lights flickered and the backyard turned into a swamp. I saw Karen running around in a raincoat, yelling at workers to set up sandbags, but it was too late. The water I'd diverted, combined with the heavy rain, was unstoppable. Her pool began to overflow, and muddy water spread across the yard, soaking her expensive furniture and ruining her perfect landscaping. For a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. Then I remembered every drop of water she had stolen, every smug comment, and every rule she'd used to intimidate the neighborhood. This wasn't just revenge, it was justice, served cold and wet. The next morning, I walked by her property. The sight was almost surreal. Her backyard looked like a lake, and workers were hauling out ruined furniture and drenched rugs. Karen stood there, soaked to the bone, trying to bark orders like she still had control. When she saw me, her face twisted with rage. "This is your fault," she screamed over the sound of pumps and vacuums. I shrugged. "Funny. I thought the HOA had rules about drainage. Maybe you should file a complaint with yourself." She didn't answer. She just glared at me, her empire literally sinking behind her. By noon, the story had spread all over the neighborhood. Some neighbors stopped by my ranch, laughing quietly and shaking their heads. "Looks like karma finally paid Karen a visit," one of them said. I didn't argue. Karen's backyard looked like a battlefield for days after the flood. The once pristine lawn, the perfectly placed patio furniture, and even her grand pool deck were all caked in mud and debris. Neighbors walked by slowly, some shaking their heads, others hiding small smiles. The woman who had lorded over everyone with her HOA authority was now the laughingstock of the street. But I knew this wasn't over. Karen wasn't the type to bow out gracefully, and I fully expected her next move to be something bold and stupid. Sure enough, my phone rang early the next morning. It was the sheriff's office. "Mr. Daniels," the deputy said, his voice serious. "We got a complaint from a Ms. Karen Blake. She claims you caused damage to her property and that you've been interfering with her water supply. Mind coming down here to give your side of the story?" I almost laughed. I was just about to call you myself. I replied, I've got video evidence of her siphoning water from my well for weeks. I'll bring everything I have. I spent the next hour gathering my files, the trail camera footage of Karen and her hired men pumping water in the dead of night, my detailed water meter logs, and photos of the tire tracks by my pump house. Mason, my friend and retired water inspector, met me at the sheriff's office. He had already reviewed my data and confirmed its accuracy. We walked into that office like we were heading to court calm, prepared, and confident. The deputy leaned back in his chair, eyebrows raised, as I played the footage. "That's her," he asked, pointing at the screen where Karen was hooking her pump to my line. "Clear as day," I said. "And this is just one of 3 nights I caught her. She's been draining hundreds of gallons at a time." Mason chimed in. "This isn't just unethical, it's illegal. She's tampering with a private water source. Depending on the county code, this could be treated as theft of utilities, which is a serious charge." The deputy nodded. "We'll issue a formal notice. If she continues, we'll pursue charges. You've got nothing to worry about." "Mr. Daniels." I left that office feeling like the weight of the world had been lifted off my shoulders. But I wasn't finished yet. Later that afternoon, the HOA board called for an emergency meeting. I knew Karen would be there, trying to spin her story and regain control. I made sure to arrive early, armed with every piece of evidence. When Karen walked into the meeting room, she was dressed to impress, heels clicking, hair perfect, makeup heavy. But her confidence cracked the moment she saw the stack of documents and the USB drive I placed on the table. "This is harassment," she snapped. "You're trying to ruin my reputation with false claims." I stayed calm. "No, Karen, you ruined your own reputation when you stole from me, and by extension, this entire neighborhood." The room was packed. Neighbors who rarely attended meetings were now eager to see the showdown. I plugged the USB into the projector, and once again, her face appeared on the big screen, caught red-handed in night vision, pumping water like she owned it. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. "This is your HOA president," I said, my voice steady. "She has been stealing water during a drought. Not for the community. Not for a public cause, just for her oversized pool." Karen jumped to her feet. "This is taken out of context. I was testing the line for the neighborhood." "Testing," I cut her off. "At 2 in the morning, with your personal pump," I pointed to the screen. "Everyone can see what you're doing." "Karen, the evidence is right here." For once, Karen was speechless. The other board members, Rick, Jenna, and Sam, looked at each other, clearly embarrassed. Rick finally spoke up. "Karen, this is serious. We can't have a president who breaks the law while lecturing everyone else about rules." A vote was called right there. The decision was unanimous. Karen was suspended from her position as HOA president, effective immediately. The room erupted in quiet cheers and sighs of relief. The woman who had terrorized this neighborhood with fines and fake authority had finally been dethroned. But Karen wasn't done trying to claw back her power. 2 days later, I got a letter from her lawyer accusing me of willful property damage due to the floodwater. I read it twice and laughed out loud. She was desperate. I handed the letter to Mason. He shook his head. "She doesn't have a case. The storm combined with natural runoff did the damage. You didn't touch her property or divert anything illegally. In fact, the county's own water management rules back you up. We drafted a response backed with county records and video footage of the storm." Within days, her lawyer backed off, likely realizing they didn't stand a chance. To add salt to the wound, Karen received a hefty fine from the county for tampering with my water well. It wasn't just about money. It was the official mark of guilt she'd tried so hard to avoid. The shift in the neighborhood was immediate. People who once cowered under her threats were now smiling, waving, and thanking me for standing up. Rick, who'd always been her right-hand man, came to my ranch. "You saved this community from her," he admitted. "She was bleeding us dry with fines and fake rules. I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to," I said. "Just remember, stand up for what's right. Don't let someone like Karen control you again." By the end of the week, Karen's mansion was still a mess. Repair crews were digging up her lawn. The pool had been drained to remove the mud, and her once perfect yard looked like a construction site. She wouldn't look me in the eye anymore. The mighty HOA Queen had been reduced to nothing more than a cautionary tale. That night, I sat on my porch, watching the sun set over my land. My well was full again, my ranch was quiet, and the air felt lighter without Karen's constant interference. Justice wasn't just served, it was carved in stone. The day Karen's removal from the HOA became official, the entire neighborhood seemed to breathe easier. For the first time in years, there was no stack of petty warning letters taped to mailboxes, no threatening HOA emails about lawn heights or fence colors. People smiled more, waved to each other, and some even stopped by my ranch to thank me in person. It wasn't about me being some kind of hero, it was about proving that bullies like Karen could be stopped when someone had the backbone to stand up. I remember one afternoon, a neighbor named Bill, an older man who'd been fined multiple times for improper tree trimming, came to my porch. He shook my hand with such relief that it felt like a lifetime of frustration poured out in that single gesture. "You didn't just stand up for yourself," he said, his voice steady. "You stood up for all of us. I thought we'd be stuck under her thumb forever." Hearing that meant more to me than I expected. For years, Karen had acted like she owned the place, making everyone afraid to speak out. Now, her power was gone, and the community felt united in a way I'd never seen before. But my fight wasn't just about defeating Karen. It was about protecting what mattered: my land, my water, and the legacy my father and grandfather had built. I'd spent countless days on this ranch, fixing fences under the hot sun, tending to the animals in the biting cold, and working every inch of soil to keep our little corner of the world thriving. No one, especially not some power-hungry HOA president, was going to take that away from me. Karen's mansion, once the crown jewel of the street, now looked like a cautionary tale. The floodwater had left its mark: mud-stained walkways, dead patches of grass, and a pool that still needed major repairs. I saw her out there a few times, barking at contractors, but there was no confidence left in her voice. She avoided eye contact with me and the other neighbors. The Queen had been dethroned, and she knew it. A week after her HOA removal, I got a call from the sheriff's office. "Mr. Daniels," the deputy said, "the investigation into Karen's water theft is closed. She's been fined, and she's agreed to pay restitution for the water she took. Looks like you won this one." I smiled. "Appreciate the call, Sheriff. Maybe now this place can go back to being a neighborhood instead of a battleground." That evening, I took a slow walk around my property. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of fresh hay and warm earth. My horses grazed quietly in the pasture, and the sun cast a golden light over the hills. For the first time all summer, I felt truly at peace. No more sneaking around at night to guard my water. No more constant tension with someone who thought rules were made to benefit only her. The neighborhood even started to change. With Karen gone, the HOA board decided to review and soften some of its harshest regulations. Fines for trivial things like a garden bed being too wild or a truck being parked in a driveway were reduced or dropped altogether. People were free to enjoy their homes again, without the fear of constant harassment. A few days later, the board held a barbecue as a sort of peace offering to the community. I went, mostly to keep the peace, and I was surprised at how many folks thanked me again. Some even joked that I should run for HOA president. I just laughed. I've had enough of HOA politics to last me a lifetime. I told them I'm happy right where I am on my land, with my family, and with my water exactly where it belongs. As the sun set that evening, I stood by my porch and thought about everything that had happened. It wasn't just about flooding Karen's mansion or exposing her lies. It was about reclaiming what was right. Not just for me, but for everyone who had been bullied into silence. Sometimes, all it takes is one person standing firm to remind the rest that fairness still matters. I poured myself a glass of sweet tea, sat back in my rocking chair, and watched the sky turn shades of orange and pink. The ranch was quiet, peaceful, and alive again. Justice had been served, not through anger or chaos, but through persistence, proof, and a little clever thinking. Before heading inside, I looked over the hills one last time and smiled. This land is mine, I thought, and no HOA Karen will ever take that away again. Looking back, this wasn't just a fight about water or property lines. It was about standing up for what's right, even when the odds feel stacked against you. Karen thought her HOA title made her untouchable, but in the end, truth and persistence won. My ranch, my family's legacy, and our way of life are stronger now, not just because I stood my ground, but because the entire community finally saw through her lies. Sometimes, justice isn't about the loudest voice or the fanciest title. It's about doing what needs to be done, no matter how tough the road gets. And let me tell you, watching that mansion sink under the weight of its own greed was a reminder that karma doesn't miss. What about you? Have you ever faced someone who thought they could take what's yours without consequence? If you were in my shoes, would you have fought back the same way? If this story struck a chord with you, I'd love for you to share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy tales of justice, resilience, and standing tall against the odds, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. You never know which story might inspire you next or remind you that no one is above fairness.